PodcastOne presents the Steve Austin Show Classics.
I'm rolling sound. I got Ken Anderson on the Skype line. I'm sitting here looking at him on a video. God dang, can you imagine the technology? I'm 52 years old. I'm fixing to be 53 in December. How are you, Ken? Technology is not my strong point. You look like $1 million. How are you?
I'm great. It's good to be looking at you.
You're drinking a cold beverage there. What time of the day is it over there? About 4 o'clock?
It is 3:43.
And so that requires a Bud Light for the conversation.
Well, I figured I was going to be talking to Steve Austin, so I better have a Steve Weiser.
God dang, dude. I just got back from Thanksgiving, and holy smokes, I jumped off my diet just for a minute. And in the course of about 10 days, I don't know how many bottles of whiskey I have drank, so I'm right along there with you. And I figured, hey, man, I was doing good. It's a holiday season. I don't have a project coming up. I'm going to go ahead and let my hair down, so to speak. So that's what I'm doing. But nonetheless, I got to get my ass back in the gym. You know, on today's conversation, we're going to talk a lot about your wrestling academy that you just started. And we'll touch on your career and stuff like that and just shoot the breeze and get caught up. You know, I remember you way back in the day. We hit it off in WWE and just became good friends. And then, you were gone, I was gone, and then we kind of went our separate ways. You went down to TNA. But let's start off the conversation with the here and now. And tell me about the wrestling school and why you decided to start a wrestling school and what you guys are teaching everybody versus what everybody else is teaching everybody.
When I started in the wrestling business, Wisconsin and Minnesota was really sort of a hotbed for pro wrestling. People were running shows. There were places that you could go get trained properly. But I got trained by a guy who, didn't make it to the WWE. Two guys who didn't make it to the WWE, but I was lucky in that they understood psychology and they understood what it actually takes to make it in the professional wrestling business. But it was just sort of a ring in a room, and we got in there and they showed us the basics, but everything else we sort of had to figure out on our own. And Daivari and I spun our wheels for 6.5 years doing the independent thing and figuring out what works and what doesn't work. And we got booked for WWE a lot. And we'd go there to just do, tryouts or dark matches. Every time we went, we would sort of try to be sponges and talk to guys like yourself. And I remember specifically there was a time where we were there, and I don't know where everybody else was, but it was just you, me, Daivari, and ODB in the ring, and you were working with us. And you didn't treat us like we were just jobbers or whatever. You really helped us out. And it was people like that and instances like that where we were able to pick up information and just little bits and pieces. Then we'd go and apply those to our matches, and we got better progressively. But it just took so long, and we made so many missteps. And we wanted to have a place where everybody, for all intents and purposes, everybody at the school has been successful in the wrestling business to a degree. And we sort of know what it takes to make it. And we know the things that you don't necessarily have to do in order to make it. And so we're able to not only get in and teach people how to do the wrestling moves, which is important, but not as important as the psychological aspect of it, the storytelling aspect of it.
Well, tell me about some of the things that you don't need to make it.
For instance, one of the things that just pops into my head is we kept trying to send these videos to WWE. We'd have people cut together these music videos for us where they take the best parts of your matches and kind of clip them together and send them to the WWE. And they don't care about that stuff because everybody has one little point in their match where they do something right, and they're able to pull that out. WWE wants to see a full match, like a full small match, 5-minute match. They want to see your mistakes as well as your positives, and they want to see how you correct those.
How long have you guys been up and running now?
1 year. December 6th will be 1 year. So
it's you and Daivari. Molly Holly's over there?
Yep, she's one of our trainers. It's majority of the time it's Daivari and I. It's just Shawn, Daivari, and I.
Right.
But we also have Eric Cannon and Arya Daivari, who's Shawn's brother, who's doing it right now in WWE.
When I think back some of the old wrestling schools, and then when you say Minnesota, I go back to the old Vern Gagne days, and man, they were just killing those guys, and they were basically training in a barn. It was cold as hell, making them run the stairs, all the squats, all the push-ups, carrying guys. I just heard the stories of pure brutality, and it was just an old thing to do, kind of like down there in Florida. I guess probably almost every school there was has some old school stories about guys trying to weed out people who don't really belong or don't really want to be there. And so, you get them out, and then you just focus on people who are serious enough to make it. What about you? Are you trying to run people off? You know what it takes to be in ring shape. I know what it takes to be in ring shape. There's been times, when I came back from my tricep injury and, stopped through ECW. Then all of a sudden I get to WWF and I'm working with Savio Vega for 2 months straight. It took me 2 months to get the rust off and get my lungs back. And god dang, I've told the story many times, but I love telling it because I love Savio Vega. Man, at first I was working heel. I had to shine him up. So then I had to get some heat on him, but I was too blown up, so I just laid in the rear chin lock on my heat, and then I had to flip-flop and fly for him to make his comeback. And, boy, I tell you what, it was everything I could do just to keep up with the guy. But once I got back in shape, I turned into a machine, and that kind of became my calling card. So are you guys trying to run people off from the inception?
No, we actually try to work with everybody. We've got some people who aren't necessarily the best athletes in the world who come to us. And for instance, we had a guy who, he couldn't bump, he couldn't run the ropes, but he tried. He tried his butt off every single week for about 3 months. And we just kept working with him. And he kept we do private sessions too. He would come for private sessions, booked, and went through about 15 of them. And eventually he came to us and said, you know what? I don't think the wrestling thing is for me, but I'd like to try my hand at being a referee. And now he's a fantastic referee. He gets booked every weekend. The thing is like, we don't just train wrestlers. We train people to get into the professional wrestling business. And even if you don't want to be a wrestler, there's a million jobs that you can do. Not a million, but there's a ton of jobs that you can do behind the scenes. You can be an announcer. You can be a commentary guy. You can be a manager. You can be a referee. So there's tons of other things. And we just try to, we don't try to beat them into submission. We don't try to run them off. We do some cardiovascular and conditioning stuff, but the majority of the time is spent talking about the psychology and why you do what you do when you do it.
So tell me about just as far as how long something like this would last. Because, going back to my days, before I had my first match, I was training for 5 months, but it was only 1 day a week. And there's 25 other people in the, wrestling academy that Chris Adams started. So, man, by the time, it started and finished, you might have, you're going through drills one after another, but your ring time was minimal and only 1 day a week. The frequency really wasn't there. Going back to my USWA territory days, man, we were working 5-6 times a week, and that was awesome. So there at the school, what's the schedule? What's the protocol? When I had my first match, I wasn't ready. So how are you getting these guys ready? And let me go back to the original question. How many days a week are you training with these kids?
So they train 3 days a week. They're either Monday, Wednesday, or Tuesday, Thursday, and then everybody comes on Friday. So the Monday through Thursday is a rough schedule. We do drills, and you're in the ring a lot. You're getting ring time, figuring out how to do things. But then Friday, we focus on tape review. We'll pull up, we've got a big projector. We pull up match. Or sometimes we'll pull up. A lot of our kids are working now. They're actually working on the weekends. And so they'll bring in a match that they had, and then we're able to put it up on the screen, pause, kind of break it down and dissect everything. Here's what you did right. Here's what you did wrong. Here's what you could have done better. But it's 3 days a week, and we've got an advanced class on Tuesdays and Thursdays, and the beginner class is Monday and Wednesday. But then, like I said, everybody comes on Friday. And we also do character development stuff. We tell them right out of the gates, start thinking of a gimmick, start thinking of something that you want to portray. And we do promos. And we once brought in an improv group, and we did a 2-day seminar with the improv group, which a lot of what we do in the wrestling business is on the fly improv. People don't realize that. They think that it's all just laid out, paint by numbers. We're just trying to give people all the different tools that are necessary to be successful in the business.
Are you helping these guys get booked, or like when you say, okay, hey man, you're ready, and people start calling? Do you have feelers out with all the independent groups, or how does that work?
Yeah, we've got a relationship with all the different independent groups in Minnesota and Wisconsin, and a lot of them have come to us and said, wait, when your guys are ready, send them our way. We'll use them. And they have. A lot of our guys are working, like I said, they're working every single weekend. We've got about, I would say, 6 solid indies right here in Minnesota that are running on a regular basis. And a lot of times, we just make the connection, and then it's up to them after that point. They usually continue to get booked by themselves. But it's, that's the thing. We tell people, hey, we can't guarantee that you're going to get work, but we can at least show you how to present yourself to a promoter, what a promoter is looking for, and we can at least connect the dots, introduce you, and then it's up to you to get booked.
I get a lot of people to send me emails and say, hey, man, is 34 too old to start the business? And 9 times out of 10, I say, man, that really is a little bit late. And they'll re-email me, but hey, man, if I just want to, get on the indie scene, or if I just want to learn how to wrestle, am I too old? I said, no, man, if you just want to learn how the business works, if you want to learn how to work a match, you want to learn the mechanics, you want to go to wrestling school for, 3, 4, 5, 6 months and just, hey, man, for something to cross off your bucket list that you did, I highly recommend it. I mean, it'll give you a whole different appreciation of the business, or you might watch the business in a different fashion. If you get any people like that, you just want to say, hey, man, I just want to learn how to work. I'm probably not going to end up at a WrestleMania main event. Hey, but I just want to do it.
We've got a guy who started with us in December of last year who is 42, I believe.
Yeah.
And when he came to us, he said, I have no delusions of grandeur. I don't think I'm going to be in WrestleMania, but it's something that I've always wanted to do. I'm not getting any younger. And his girlfriend or fiance or whatever kind of kicked him in the pants and said, do it. Do it now. Look, there's a wrestling school here. And he comes, and he's another one of those guys that he's not terribly gifted athletically, but he's got a ton of heart, and people really like him. And, the character stuff, when he gets in the ring, he actually is very good in the character department. And we've got a bunch of guys like that.
How many guys you got, or people, women as well, how many people you guys got in the school right now?
So I believe we're at about 80 students total from the time that we started. We've got about 30 to 40 right now that come on a regular basis between the 2 classes.
Is Molly Holly there on a regular basis?
No, she's not here very often, but she does like to come by, and every once in a while she'll come in on a Wednesday and talk, or a Friday when everybody comes together, she'll come in and talk about, her story, how she made it, how she wasn't supposed to make it. She was working as a Subway sandwich artist, and somebody said, hey, I think you could be a wrestler. And she's really good at kind of breaking down. But sometimes Dara and I beat our heads up against the wall. We're trying to get some point across, and it just doesn't seem to be getting through. And she's able to come in and tell them the exact same thing, but in a different way. And then they get it. It's kind of cool.
Man, let's think it, man. I always thought, first of all, she's an extremely nice human being, but man, she could work her ass off. Molly is an unbelievable worker, and I think she was underrated and underappreciated, and probably underused. And I mean, as a compliment to her, and she don't get me wrong, she had her moments, but she was awesome inside the ring. I mean, she was one of the best women workers that there were at the time when we were there.
She really is. She could work with anybody, and I think that was her thing for a while. Is WWE would go out and find these models that didn't have any aspirations of being in the wrestling business in the first place, but somebody said, hey, you should try wrestling, and they'd stick her with Molly, and Molly could pull a good match out of them no matter what.
Hey, man, going to your early days in the business, what got you hooked on wrestling? And what I'm trying to get is, you tell some of these kids with aspirations of making it, hey, man, you're probably going to starve your ass off for a little bit. And, like I did, I was making $15 and $20 a night, running up and down the road, 400-mile, shots all totaled in. And I was starving, literally. That's just the way it was. You coming in, the dues you paid. What do you tell these kids about trying to break in? Because, man, when I look at the business these days, man, I think it's as hard as it ever was to get in the business. Back in the day, they used to, crack on you, try to beat you down. But these days, because of just the looks and the way the business has evolved athletically from a performance inside the squared circle, it's as tough now to get in as it ever was.
For me, I always tell them, if you're expecting to make a ton of money out of the gates, forget it. It's not going to happen. It happens for a couple people here and there, but those are outliers. And I tell them not, you have to get some sort of pay, I think, for your work. Otherwise, you got promoters using guys for free. So if I'm using these guys for free, I don't have to pay anybody. And it kind of hurts everybody to fuss over $50 or $25 extra. To me, when I got in the business and I decided this is something that I want to do and I want to make it, I looked at the independent scene as my college for getting into a profession. It was my college football for playing in the pros. And a lot of times people, if you want to be a doctor, you go to school and you spend $250,000 in 10 years of your life. And then that there's a light at the end of the tunnel and you're going to be able to make that money back. So, in this business, there aren't as many guarantees. Like there's more of a guarantee to be a doctor if you put the time in than there is to be a pro wrestler. It's kind of I believe the statistics are a lot more in the favor of, if you want to be in the NFL or the NBA or Major League Baseball, they hire hundreds of people a year out of college. WWE hires maybe 100, and that's probably being generous. And of that 100, maybe 50 make it to TV, and of those 50, 10 make it to the main roster. And how many of those people then end up, being successful or being a mainstay for the next 5, 10, 15, 20 years?
Again, I get a ton of emails. Hey, Steve, you got a good wrestling school that you would recommend. This is before I knew about yours. So that being said, and, I'll always, recommend Landstorm Academy and, Ricky Morton, I guess he's got his over Tennessee. If people want to find you, get a hold of the wrestling school or talk to someone about joining, how do they go about that process? How do they find you?
So we've got a website. It's theacademyprowrestling.com, and on there, it has all of our contact info. It's got a phone number. You can text the phone number, or you can, leave us a voicemail. You can send us an email. And then we also do, right from our website, you can schedule a consultation. So you can come in and spend 30 minutes to an hour with us, tour the facility, and talk about what it is that's, what does success mean to you? What do you want to get out of this business? And here's how I would recommend you go about doing that.
At least you're upfront and honest with the folks. Because, dude, there ain't no guarantees in this business.
We're real upfront and honest with them about even if they're athletic and have all the tools, it's still not a guarantee.
Right.
You still really have to put in the work, and you have to be able to take no for an answer, or at least hear no. You don't have to accept it necessarily, but you have to be able to hear no. You have to be able to take a lot of constructive criticism. And, once we get going, we're not easy on our students as far as, somebody gets in the ring and we tell them, pay attention to detail, do it this way, and they don't do it that way. I turn into a drill sergeant really quickly.
How much are you mixing it up in the ring with the students?
Oh, yeah. We're in the ring with those students regularly. I won't necessarily get in there and take every single bump. I usually try to use one of our students that already has some experience. Like, here are the mechanics of it. Here's how you do it. If they're still not getting it, I'll get in there and take a flat back or show them what it actually takes. And we'll also wrestle our students from time to time. So one of the things that we like to do when you actually have enough experience and you're figuring things out that you can put together a little 5-minute match, we'll pair people up and say, have a 5-minute match, tell me a story, don't get crazy. I don't want to see moonsaults and things like that. But sometimes if we feel comfortable enough, or even if, occasionally there will be somebody that we feel could be dangerous to work with our other students, rather than put them at risk, we'll take that on ourselves and get in there and just try to keep it as simple as possible. Because, we know how to sort of put ourselves in a situation where we're not going to get injured.
Hey, man, when did you start watching the business growing up down there?
So I was a late bloomer. I didn't start watching until I believe it was 96 or 97. I actually disliked wrestling when I was a kid. I watched it briefly, when Hogan was having his big run. I watched Saturday Night's Main Event a few times with my dad, and then I fell away from it. And my buddies, a couple good buddies of mine, would always talk about wrestling, and I was like, man, what are you watching that stuff for? It's stupid. It's fake. And it's a bunch of guys rolling around on the floor with each other. And one night, I was at my buddy's house. We were playing cards, and he said, hey, man, we're going to watch wrestling tonight. I was like, no, we're not. He's like, yes, we are. You're going to watch. There's this guy who's really making a name for himself right now. He's the best. He's the coolest thing in wrestling right now. And I was like, all right, whatever. And I sat back and I was watching the show, and all of a sudden I heard this glass break, and this bald-headed son of a bitch came driving to the ring in a pickup truck with a 6-pack of beer on his lap. Get the hell out of my way. And I was like, okay, that guy's cool. And I started watching then, and then every week I would watch just to see what you would do. And then I got sucked into what The Undertaker was doing, and The Rock, and Nation of Domination, and, everybody. Then I realized what I had actually been missing out on all these years. And then I started, it just became like, that's all I did was watch wrestling and watch old tapes and things like that. And we'd talk about it at parties. We would talk about it at work. I remember we had this, I was working as a nuclear security officer. We had to do these rounds every night, and somebody would watch you on camera, and I remember I'd do the BMF walk around just to pop the guys that I was working with. And then I was at a party one night, and somebody said, hey, you can go to wrestling school and learn how to do that. I never even, it never even entered my mind, like, how do people actually do this stuff? Somebody said there's a wrestling school that you can go to, and I left the party early that night, which was a rare occurrence, and I went home, and I got on AOL.com or whatever it was, that Google didn't exist then. But I looked up wrestling schools. I found one in Chicago, emailed the guy, and a couple days later I got a phone call from a guy in Green Bay, and he said, hey, you can come up for a tryout. I think it was $250 for a tryout. And I got in the ring. I remember the first time I ever got in the ring, it was a crappy 16-foot ring. Like bumping on concrete. The ropes were all floppy and wobbly and blood stained and rips in the canvas and stuff like that. I remember I got in that ring the first time, and I was like, I don't know. I just had this feeling come over me like, this is awesome. This is what I want to do. And from that day.
Man, how old were you at this time?
I was 22.
Man, I didn't know I was that much older than you. Yeah, because I started, I thought, I kind of started a little bit late. I guess I was 23. By the time I had my first match, I guess I was almost 24. And so almost about the same age, although I watched it since I was about 7 or 8 years of age. So then you went full bore. You kicked around the indie scene for quite a while before you landed in the WWE. And you showed a lot of promise and a lot of potential. What was the indie scene like prior to getting into WWE?
There were a ton of them. There were tons of indies in Wisconsin and Minnesota. Like, I traveled around, pretty much stuck in Wisconsin, Minnesota. But I remember when I first started out, I would work 2 weekends out of the month. But by the end, when I was really rolling, I got a job as a personal trainer. Daivari and I got a job as personal trainers at Bally's, so that we could wrestle Friday, Saturday, and Sunday every week. We would travel all over the place, and sometimes we'd do double shots. And occasionally somebody would run a Wednesday night show, and we just wrestle as much as we could. Try to get our name out there. Try to get better. And we would send tapes to all the different. It was Kevin Kelly when I first started. That's who I first sent my first tape to. And then it was Dr. Tom, and then it was Tommy Dreamer. And we sent tape after tape after tape. Probably none of them ever got, they'd probably never seen one of them. But we at least did it. And then anytime WWE would be coming to the area, and I'm talking like the area meaning a 15-mile or a 15-hour driving radius,
Yeah.
I would drive 15 hours to Cleveland to wrestle, just to have an experience to wrestle for Sunday Night Heat or Jacked or Metal or whatever their shows were at the time, and drive back.
What do you think about the way the business has evolved from your time on the indie scene to your time in WWE and then going on into TNA? And I know you've just recently done a little bit of stuff for Ring of Honor, but just going back from the old school days or what you grew up watching, myself, Undertaker, Rock, Triple H, Mankind, and Degeneration X, all those Attitude Era guys, from that style to what the business has turned into currently. Because I would imagine with your school, you're spending a fair amount of time at least studying or watching Monday Night Raw and SmackDown. Stylistically, your thoughts on the way the business has moved forward.
So the thing that's frustrating to me is that it seems like guys and girls are told exactly what to do, paint by numbers. It's not, just go out there and try some stuff and see what works and what doesn't work. And it's just, people are handed a script and said, say this exactly verbatim. That's kind of frustrating to me. I wish that more people were given the opportunity to fail on their own or succeed on their own, right? That's the only thing that really frustrates me. But I like the wrestling. I like watching the shows. I mean, I don't like watching the shows necessarily, like Raw and SmackDown, but when they have the big matches, I love, the build up for those matches is always amazing. And they're always given a ton of time. It's just the guys that are on the undercard trying to get over. I think that they're sort of hamstrung and told, don't think for yourself, do it our way because it worked for us. So it's definitely going to work for you. And that doesn't seem to be successful as much as, how many guys has WWE hired in the past where like a guy like a Brock or a Kurt Angle and taking him right out of college, fresh, no experience at all, giving them the tools, told them to do exactly, do it this way. That's kind of a rare success rate, I think. You got more people that they tried that with that failed. Am I making any sense here? I feel like
yeah, that makes sense. But what do you think? You sent me a text message a couple of times, and you said, "Hey, man, send me a couple of matches that you dug from back in the day." And I probably sent you Ole and Arn versus Rock and Roll, or a Midnight versus Rock and Roll, and going back to that style of work. And what I'm talking mid to late 1980s. And then you come up on Attitude Era stuff. And now as we are here in 2017, with the business moving so quickly, it's just like the game of football. I know you're a huge football fan. As you look at the game of football, it's sped up tremendously with all the hurry-up offense. You don't have John Madden out there, telling the stories almost like a Jim Ross or a Gordon Soley or Lance Russell. And you got the guys, it's just rapid fire. So the game of football has changed. The guys are getting smoked, injured damn near every other play. With the business of pro wrestling, I just mean stylistically, the way, put this way, it's almost like trying to, because everything's so accelerated in a short attention span theater, it's putting 10 pounds of stuff in, maybe a 5 or 8 pound bag. Back in the day, you would go to the ring or I would go to the ring and, in a 10 to 12 minute match, you might have a couple of high spots. There's going to be some heat. Then you're going to go home with a little bit of a comeback. And these days, there's just a lot more action involved within the product. Are you copacetic with that? With you teaching your school, the only thing that I see that is, there's a more athletic style in the ring. I dig that. The guys and girls are better athletes than I was. And a lot of the guys that were around me were. But when you're putting so much stuff into a match in such a short amount of time, when I see a guy just automatically jump up and start heading to the next spot, and you're telling me exactly what you're doing instead of letting the guy do it for you, and it's just, to me, the illusion is gone. But when you're able to see the magic that's happening, it's like Copperfield, this king of the illusion, if all of a sudden you know how he's doing everything, it kind of takes you away as the person watching to enjoy. Does that make sense? That business is so sped up that you can see what's coming next because of all the tells.
I'm a huge fan of Stephen King, and I think a lot of times his books, I read a ton of his books, and they were almost maddeningly slow with the character development and, placing all these little bits and pieces, these little breadcrumbs. But in the end, if you stuck with it through to the end, it was fantastic. It was the best comeback ever and the best finish. Yeah, nowadays it's just so fast paced that people don't have a chance to sell. And I'm a big fan of selling, it's just move after move after move after move after move. And to me, the moves, we always tell our students, the moves don't matter really. I mean, it's weird to say that in the wrestling business, but it's the way that it's the story that you're telling and the way you're telling the story. And it's how you sell things, taking your time to sell a particular move that for people that are just sitting in the front row, that move looks like it would kill you. But guys take those moves and they pop right back up again and they're off to the next spot. It sort of spoils the illusion to a degree. And like you said, it's just so fast paced. But I think that they're trying to cram, you got a 3-hour Raw now, right? 3 hours. And how many different matches do you see? And how many of those matches actually, I remember when I was there, they started doing the 3-segment matches a lot. You know, you'd have 3 full segments to tell your story so you could really take your time. But if you're given 5 minutes, go out there and get over it. It's like, I don't think people understand that. Like, I don't necessarily have to do a bunch of stuff in that 5 minutes move wise, but I can tell a ton of, if I just tell the story and I tell it slowly, I think, you know, you'll get over. I sound like I'm babbling here, but I always tell the students, you know, if WWE came to town tomorrow and they have to hire somebody and they've got a guy who can do a headlock takeover, an arm drag, a hip toss, and a body slam, and they've got this other guy that can do all of those things plus moonsaults and hurricanranas and flippy flops, but they just do them kind of half-assed. Who is the WWE going to hire? They're going to hire the guy that has just the basic building blocks, the solid foundation.
You're listening to another classic episode of The Steve Austin Show, only on PodcastOne.
The Steve Austin Show. The Steve Austin Show.
Hey, man, what happened to your career in the WWE? I mean, you were there, and I just thought, hey, man, this kid's got a lot of potential. But it just seems like there's a little bit of politics going on with your run.
There was, but from time to time I sit and try to figure out, because I want my students to learn from my mistakes as well as my successes. You know, and anytime I get a chance to open up and share stuff that I look as missteps in the business, I try to share it with them. You know, the big thing is I was getting a really good push, and I always tried to maintain that humility. I tried to be as humble as I possibly could. I know this can be taken away from me tomorrow, but at the same time, you start to believe your own bullshit a little bit. And that when Chris Benoit did what he did, for some reason, I felt like the entire world needed to know what Ken Anderson felt about that, you know, and I went on some news talk shows and things like that. And then the whole steroid thing, which I think was a huge kind of a misconception. You know, people knew part of the story, but not the entire story. And if you tell your side of the story, then you're being defensive. But if you say nothing at all, you allow those people to just fill in the spots. And that's what happens. You know, it was that kind of stuff. And also, when I was on SmackDown, I started my career in WWE on SmackDown, and I was able to earn the trust and the respect of all the top guys there. Everybody, really. I don't think it was just the top guys, but I felt like I had earned the trust and respect of all my peers. And when I went over to Raw, I sort of, for some reason, felt like, oh, you know, I've already earned that respect. I'll just have that respect will carry over with me. And I didn't take the time to humble myself again and kind of start off as a new guy. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I mean, you're working with a different crew. You roll down with, hey, man, I got the swagger. I'm over here, so I'm going to be over there. And, you know, I guess you roll in, all of a sudden, man, people may think, hey, man, this guy might be a little bit full of himself. Hey, man, you used to hang with the other crew. You know, you already paid your dues. You know everybody. So maybe it was a case of something like that.
And my style was, I always try to emulate a real fight as much as possible. You know, if you watch UFC, nobody ever takes a crisp, flat back bump. Guys fall into the ropes sometimes. You get punched, you land on your ass, you pop back up. I would also, I'd cover up a lot. You know, if somebody was striking me, I wouldn't just give them the old school clean, you know, punch, and they punch you and you put your head right back in the same spot. Or if somebody would chop you, I wouldn't do that. And I remember Taker pulling me aside one day, and he was like, keep doing that stuff because it's unique and it sets you apart. But he said, I'm telling you right now, you're going to get over to Raw, and there are people that you're going to come into contact with that aren't going to appreciate that. They're going to think that you're being difficult to work with. And instead of taking his advice, I just kept doing what Ken Kennedy was doing over on SmackDown and didn't try to, you know, open myself up. And so I think people thought certain people thought that I was difficult to work with when I was covering up and things like that.
That's interesting. You know, Tager used to cover up like that. He'd give you the openings, but he would cover up like that.
I wouldn't cover up, but I would just make it look like I was trying to cover up a little bit, or if somebody chopped me in the corner, I would cover up, sort of walk away. They'd come to grab me. I'd even shove them off, kick me or do something to me, and I'll give myself back to you was the way that I thought.
So many people. It's funny because some people say, "Hey, man, why would you ever send anybody into the ropes?" Well, on one hand, that could be a logical, question, but you're in pro wrestling, so sometimes you hear people get really, really caught up and think shoot but work. Okay, that sounds good, but again, it's pro wrestling. You have to entertain, so you have to be able to understand when you've got to, hey, okay, I know this is, you wouldn't do this in a real fight, but you're not in a real fight. You're trying to, and sometimes you're trying to simulate a real fight, but at the end of the day, man, you're putting on a show. So sometimes you want to work as logically as possible, but sometimes you have to throw logic out the window. You just have to know when to do that.
Yeah, and that's a fine line, and it's hard to sort of navigate those waters sometimes.
What was the biggest difference? You spent a pretty good amount of time in TNA. What was the biggest difference between what they were doing in TNA and what you were doing in WWE?
When I was at WWE, it felt like, at least towards the end, like everybody's walking on eggshells. Everybody's worried that tomorrow might be my last day. If I say the wrong thing or do the wrong thing, I'm going to get fired. And when I got to TNA, and I think that's the sort of management style, or was the management style at WWE. It's just the way that they always wanted everybody to sort of be on edge. And when I got to TNA, it just felt like, go out there and do your job and do it to the best of your ability, and we're cool. There weren't any politics. I didn't feel any politics or anything like that over at TNA. And the biggest difference for me was, Eric Bischoff was a big part of me coming to TNA. And when I got there, he said, I know that they've been sort of hamstringing you to a degree at WWE and telling you this is what you have to say, this is when you say it. But he said, I'm just going to give you bullet points. I don't care how you get there. You just here's the main point that we're trying to get to. You figure out how Ken Anderson's going to get there and give it. And that was, and the interesting thing was, Vince Russo and whoever else was writing at the time would hand me a script, and I would look at it. And a lot of times I would call Paul Heyman. I was really good friends with Paul, and I would say, here's what they've got for me. Here's what I'm thinking. What are you thinking? And a lot of times he would really help me out and come up with a better way to say everything and do everything. And so Paul actually wrote a lot of my stuff at TNA when I first started there.
Hey, man, what do you think you would be doing right now if you hadn't gotten into business pro wrestling? Still working security?
Possibly. I never could figure out what I wanted to do. Like, everybody in high school, they told you had to figure out exactly what you want to do, and you got to, declare a major and go right now. I could just never figure it out. Couldn't figure out. I always wanted to be in the entertainment industry. And the thing was, I always wanted to do something in entertainment, and I liked working out. I liked sports. I didn't know about wrestling. And then when I found wrestling, it was like, wow, this is all the things that I love, all wrapped into one package. And it just felt like a perfect fit for me.
Dude, you were personal training people there for a while, weren't you?
Yes. Yep. I got the job as a personal trainer so that I could, I'm at the gym already. I might as well get a workout in. And B, it gave me the freedom to be able to work. My schedule was Monday through Thursday, and I would work long hours too. I'd get there at 8 a.m. and I'd leave the gym at midnight most nights. And I just train people that whole time, get a workout in here and there. But Friday, Saturday, and Sunday was open so that we could travel around and go do our independent shots. And, occasionally, if WWE called or I called WWE and got a job there or got a little extra spot, I was able to take off from my personal training gig and go. It really gave me a lot of freedom.
Do you think working as a personal trainer, just from in the gym aspect, help you with teaching guys stuff in the ring?
Big time. It really does. I remember I loved personal training. I really liked training people, even the ones that are super frustrating, because out of 100 clients that you get, one or two of them actually do exactly what you tell them to do and super hard workers. But I also enjoyed the idea of how do I get this person to understand what I'm saying and actually get them to do it. And I find that today I'll have a student that I'll show him one time how to do something, I'll break down a match of his and he gets it. And he's always changing and growing. And then there's those other ones that are really frustrating. The guy that I was telling you about before that spent 3 months not being able to bump or hit the ropes. And it's just, how do I figure out how to get this guy to be somewhat successful? And success is in the eye of the beholder. It's, we've talked about this before, but just because you don't have to, in order to come to the Academy School of Professional Wrestling in Minnesota, you don't have to want to make it to Raw and SmackDown, main event WrestleMania. We will train you if all you want to do is learn how the business operates. If you want to get in and have one match a month and get to blow off some steam, whatever it is that you feel is successful or success, we want to bring you there.
What is your technique for teaching a great working punch? Because it took me a while to master that. And if I go back and watch some of my older stuff, it was almost like a push punch. It was almost like a 2-stage deal. And I was trying to stop right there at the jawline. And, Chris kind of told me to kind of flick my hand right when I got there. Of course, I ended up stopping that. But that was my default mechanism when I first was learning. What are you telling people? Because it's one of my pet peeves is just the way people hit the ropes is another one of my pet peeves. Lockups are one of my pet peeves. A good working punch. Some of those things. Well, what are you telling people about a good working punch?
Those are all my pet peeves too, by the way. They really are. If somebody locks up and they do a crappy lockup, stop, do it again. Even if, that's not what we're getting to. We're going to get to headlock takeover or whatever, but you lock up like crap. I always tell them, train like you fight. U.S. military trains full bore during a time of peace so that when the war actually happens, you're already used to fighting that way. I always tell them that it's sort of like drawing a bow and arrow or like throwing a baseball. It's kind of like those two things combined. And I always tell them, look, you have to figure out if everybody did everything the same, it would suck, right? The business
Absolutely.
would suck. You want people to have little differences and variances. So I always tell them, figure out, watch some people that you like, and we'll figure out how we do that style. But one of the things that I teach them is to stand up against a brick wall or a post and punch that post and learn how to throw that punch as hard as you would if the person was standing there, because you'll quickly learn how to pull your punch or your knuckles will be dusted up. That's one thing. We've had some students who have booked private training sessions and they come in and all we do is work on punches for an hour. And I think it's super important. I think I always say those little tiny things will lock up. How snappy you are with everything, your punches. You might be able to execute this pretty beautiful move, but it's the in-between stuff that looks like crap. And that's actually, Daivari is at WWE right now, and he's told us the guys on 205 Live do all this pretty stuff, but their in-between sucks sometimes. And when they get back through the curtain, that's what they're hearing. They're not hearing like, oh, that move you did was fantastic. They're hearing, man, your rear chin lock sucked. Your punches suck. Your forearms suck.
Yeah, you brought the rear chin lock. That's another one of my pet peeves, the gap. You can't have any gaps in the rear chin lock.
Drives me crazy.
God dang, throughout your entire career, I never heard about you, running wild or partying too hard or getting lost in the shuffle. Did you get lost in the shuffle any? I mean, I was hanging out with the drinking crowd, or I was a drinking crowd. How did you maintain your sanity on the road? Did you have any vices?
Yeah, I would say when I was in WWE, I got into the pills a little.
Did you?
A little too much, yeah. I was real good at keeping it on the DL. Only a certain handful of people knew about it, and I was able to keep that really quiet, and not everybody didn't. It wasn't public knowledge that Ken Anderson was a partier. But yeah, I did.
Pain pills?
I regret it.
The somas or muscle actions and stuff like that?
All of it. Mostly the pain pill. Vicodin was my vice, just because I was able to function. You take a couple Vikes, your body feels great, especially if you're running that hard for that long. You're on the road 5 days a week. Felt like 10 spine busters a match from Batista for about a year. That sort of adds up day after day. So just pop a couple Vikes, I feel good. I got some energy. I'm sitting here talking to this person, and they don't even know that I got a couple of Vikes in my system. So,
man, I had a couple of Vikes. If things were bad, I had 3 broke transverse process in my back from that one incident in Meadowlands. From all the bumps and bruises, the deal, dude. I mean, your whole body can't hurt at times, but I was just never one of the guys who got strung up on them. I was, I enjoyed my alcohol after the matches. The whiskey, vodka, beer, whatever it was. But yeah, pot of coffee, 2 Vikes, I'm feeling good. So dude, I mean, I would never take over 4 or 5 Vikes in a day. And that's candy compared to, what a lot of guys, talking to Dale Wilkes, 50, 60, perks or Vikes or whatever. What kind of numbers were you doing with those things?
I spent 1 year. I remember when it started becoming a problem, my ex-wife came to me and just set down a piece of paper and she said, "You've spent $35,000 this year on Vicodin."
Dude, are you kidding me?
No, I'm not kidding you. I'm not kidding you. I would order 1,000 Vikes at a time, and I'd go through them in a couple weeks. I was also very, I was giving them out too to my friends.
Right.
I was good at sharing. $35,000. And how stupid is that?
How'd you get off of them?
You know what? Interestingly enough, the WWE at one point, I remember I had surgery on my shoulder, I believe. And I was actually, when I came out of that surgery, I was in a lot of pain. I actually could have used some pain pills. And Doc Andrews, he was very conservative and gave me like 20 or 30 10s. And I burned through those in a couple days. And then I called him back for a refill. And then he gave me like 10 more, and I burned through those right away. I called him back. I was like, I'll get one more refill out of him. And that one more refill turned out to be Johnny Ace called me and said, "Kenny, they think you got a pain pill problem. We're sending you to rehab." So they actually sent me to Hazelden and for an evaluation. I was embarrassing. It was super embarrassing because I was actually with my family, or with my ex-wife's family. We were spending time out in San Francisco. Her great-grandma was there. Her mom and dad were there, her sister. And I had to tell them that WWE is sending me to get an evaluation at Hazelden. And I actually went, and 5 days later, they let me go. And they said, "You don't have an addiction problem. You just have an abuse and pain problem." And I quit. I actually got on Suboxone for a while.
Yeah.
Which is like, and the only reason I got on the Suboxone was because I didn't want to go through the withdrawals. And I was like, I can't be working this schedule going through withdrawals. So I got on the Suboxone. And then one day I just decided, okay, I'm done with that too. I felt like a slave to that stuff after a while. And it didn't make me feel good. It wasn't like, it doesn't get you high. It just, it is a good pain reliever. And then I just said, like, I have to do this. I have to get off this stuff. And I quit. And I actually experienced 12 days of withdrawals. I laid on the couch and shivered and took hot baths and things like that, and I just quit.
Do you tell your kids coming to that school about the vices of living on the road and all the traps that are laying out there for them, and they're very easy to get into?
Occasionally. It's not something that I've, I haven't sat down in front of the whole class and kind of gone through it. But now that you say that, it's not a bad lesson, I guess, for a day just to talk about stuff like that, because it can ruin your career. You can take a career that was headed for the hills and or the mountains and just end it. And I think that was part of my demise in WWE as well.
You're listening to another classic episode of The Steve Austin Show, only on PodcastOne.
A lot of times, where it's NFL, NBA, Major League Baseball, I think a lot of times they'll have, I guess he's kind of like a symposium or whatever for these guys that are just coming out of college. And, now they're, from being, athletes that are not getting paid to athletes that are getting paid, a lot of money. Hey, man, here's some of the things, take care of your money, just kind of give them the 411. And so, I think in wrestling, a little bit of 411 about some of the pitfalls or traps that you can get into, just because, dude, when I came out of North Texas State University in 87 or 88 was my last year, And I got into the pro wrestling school in 89. I broke in the back half of 89. I remember riding, we were doing a show. I was living in Denton, Texas, which is right outside of Dallas. We were riding to the show in Oklahoma. I was riding shotgun, and the person beside me says, "Hey, man, you want a bike?" And, dude, I'm a straight-laced kid out of South Texas. All I did was play football, run track. I was an athlete, lifted weights, and I was drinking my beers and my whiskey, but I didn't know anything about a pill. I looked at him and I said, "Man, what's a bike?" "And it's a pain pill." "You want one?" I said, "Man, what for?" He gave you a little bit of a buzz. Well, I don't really need a buzz, but yeah, okay, I'll take one. So, you get introduced to a lot of stuff, man, living on the road with a bunch of guys. I mean, things that I never thought were humanly possible. I remember back in the day when, the GHB was going around. I never saw the New Bane, heard about the New Bane. New Bane was introduced to the wrestlers by the bodybuilders. I never saw that. I know a lot of guys that got into it. But, dude, my point is, there's just a lot of shit that can happen once you get in that damn business. I mean, there's a lot of shit that can happen in life. But specifically in the entertainment business, which pro wrestling is a part of.
I never thought in a million years that I would have that kind of a problem or that kind of abuse, right? I remember the first time somebody gave me a pain pill, and I was just like, man, I've got energy. I'm not, it doesn't make me sleepy or drowsy. I've got energy, and my body feels great. If I could just get my hands on one big stash of this could last me for an entire year, and I wouldn't have to. I'd just take one or two a day, and it'd be fine. Well, that one or two turns into 5, and then 10, and then 20, and the numbers keep going up and up and up, and then pretty soon you're just taking them just to feel normal. You're not even taking it for pain anymore. You're taking it so that you don't have the withdrawals. Like in the morning, you start to feel that cold, clammy skin, and I better take a couple now. It doesn't even get you a buzz anymore. But it's amazing. I thought that I had everything under control, and it gets away from you.
It does. Well, let's get off that. Let's go back to the wrestling school and wrap this thing up. How long does the school last? I mean, do you sign up for a set amount of time, or if you reach that amount of time, do you sign up for another length of time? How do you do that?
Yep. So right now we're doing, we're going to do 4 months. Your first 4 months is $2,000. I'm sorry, $3,000. And then, $2,000 for the first 4 months. And then we evaluate you and say you're either ready to move on to the next phase, or you need to go back and redo the first phase. And then if you want to continue on, it's $1,000 to go to 6 months. And then right now we've got a deal going where it's $4,000 for an entire year. We feel like initially we did our first special, because we didn't know what the response was going to be like in the Twin Cities. And we just wanted to get some students and get our feet off the ground, get some experience. So we did $1,000 special for anybody and everybody. It was for a year. And we got 42 students signed up. And we realized a couple months in that 1 year was just too long. At some point, we need to kick them out of the nest and you need to start flying, or at least trying to fly. Do. And so then we pared it back to 4 months. And then we realized 4 months is just too short. So we evened it out to 6. We're at 6 months right now. But like I said, you can do a full year, but after you've done the 6 months, then you can do a continuing education where it basically works just like any other gym, where you pay monthly dues and you can come up to 5 days a week now. You can come to every single class, and that's every day. We do classes from 7 to 9 p.m. and then from 9 to 11. And a lot of times it goes till midnight, 1 o'clock in the morning, but that time is open gym. So take what we just gave you in this 2 hours and now apply it.
What kind of ring are you guys operating on, Ken? I mean, earlier you talking about learning or being in that 16-footer, and I remember those in the tent towns with WWF way back in the day. Man, those were some sweet-ass bumping rings. They made this great noise. They felt great. You could run a million high spots and never get tired because the ring was so small and efficient. And then all of a sudden you get to add the 18-footers in WCW, and those are pretty good bumping rings. It got a little stiffer. And then back in the day, we got those 20-foot WWF rings rings, and those things were god awful. It felt like
I heard they were
concrete. And then you'd blow up because it was 2 extra feet that you had to deal with. And 2 feet doesn't sound like a whole lot, but you got to adjust your steps accordingly. Yeah. So anyway, what kind of rings you guys operating out of? It's not like you can just find wrestling rings floating around everywhere, believe it or not.
Yeah, no. We have an 18-foot high spots ring. It's a sweet bumping ring. A lot of the independent promotions and schools have the boards sitting right on top of the metal beams. We wrapped each one of those metal beams just for our sanity, because I know some of the wrestling schools that I've done seminars at, all you hear is that clanging and banging, and it drives me crazy. So you really have to take a big bump in the ring in order for it to make a sound. Yeah. But it's a sweet bumping ring. One of the things about wrestling that people don't understand, that especially their first, they think it's like jumping on a trampoline, falling on a trampoline. They take that first bump, and you can see their eyes like, oh, what did I sign up for?
Dude, that's one of the things, talking about my pet peeves. I love watching the look on the people's faces when they take that first bump, because it's kind of something you either dig it or you don't. And if you don't, you can learn to like it. But some people, it goes back to my Tough Enough days when I saw Miss America, Miss USA. Man, the look on her face when Fatih, I can't remember her damn name. I've been hitting the head with too many steel chairs again, but man, just the look on her face when she hit that mat, I was like, holy smokes, this is going to be fun.
We just had a girl who started with us, and she took her first bump, and you could see that deer in the headlights look like, oh my God. But she toughened up, and she just, she tried to no-sell it, but you could tell she was hurting.
Hey, man, how many tumbling drills you guys doing? Because, when I got to Chris Adams School, the first thing, we're just doing forward rolls, backwards rolls, and, then you learn to slap that mat, your basics. How much time you spend with the kids doing them basics?
So every single day, no matter where they're at, we start them off with doing rolls. They do a forward roll, backward roll, right shoulder roll, left shoulder roll, handstand roll, handstand bump, all that stuff, kip ups. They go through it every single day, because I feel like that, the rolls, if you can get those down, every single wrestling move is a variation of one of those rolls.
Right. Yeah, agreed. And repetition, you got to do the rolls, the tumbles. I 100% agree with that. Here's one thing that used to, it didn't irritate me. It was just weird. When I was watching Bill DeMott, I guess it was from some stuff down at Performance Center in Orlando. I don't believe it was Tough Enough, or maybe it was Tough Enough in 2011 when I hosted that. But when the athletes or the trainees were getting up, if you use the palm of your hand on the mat, he'd step on your hand.
He'd step on it.
Dude, but here's the thing. When I was in school in Dallas, Texas, way back in the day, learning from gentleman Chris Adams and Chico, hey, man, that's part of getting up. No one ever told me don't use your hands to get up. So, I'm not knocking Bill. I'm just saying I don't understand where that came from. Do you?
What I understand it to be is if you're in a situation where you're bumping and feeding for like a hot tag or something like that, you got bodies flipping and flying all over the place. You put your hand out like that, somebody's going to step on it and break your fingers. So I always get them to, do the fist. But other than that, I don't know why. Yeah.
Man,
other than that particular.
Yeah.
That's sort of what and nobody ever told me that. That was just like something that I sort of figured out. It's probably wrong.
I don't remember if I've ever had my hand stepped on feeding to come back, but what you're saying does make a lot of sense. Maybe that's the reason, and a completely unrelated thing. I'll never forget, just talking about getting up off a mat. Here's a quick wrestling story before we wrap this thing up. I was working an angle with Undertaker, and I just bought this titanium Omega Seamaster chronograph watch. I'm a big watch fan. And, of course, I was dumb enough to wear the watch in an angle on Monday Night Raw. And, of course, the thing has a clasp on the other side of the arm. And the clasp comes undone. My brand new $2,500 Omega watch is laying right there in the middle of the ring, and I'm kind of like on the floor on the apron, and I can't go grab the watch. And there's the Undertaker, all 6'10", 6'11", 320 pounds of him with that size 14 or 15 foot boot he's got on it. And I can see the heel hit the mat, And right there in the path of the rest of his foot is my prized Omega Seamaster watch, which he proceeded he wasn't trying to do it intentionally. He was just walking around. He didn't see my damn watch. Just stepped right on it. And so if you didn't think I was selling before I took the bump, as he stepped on my watch, I was really selling. Like, no, not the watch. God dang, I was so mad about that happening. Did you ever wear something into the ring? We're all over the place now. Did you ever wear something in the ring? Back in my days, here's an example for you. I decided it'd be cool if I got, I had the earrings, one in each ear. There for a period of time, I thought it'd be cool to get about 5 of those studs in the left ear right along the outside edge. Well, that was all fine and dandy, but in the healing process, Ken, if you ever get earrings, you got to leave those things in there until they, heal up. Yeah. Well, a couple of guys worked the headlocks on me for a couple of matches, and my ears swelled up and got infected in those studs. As my ear got fat, the studs started going through my ear. So I had to pull all those friggin' things out, and that's when I decided me having a bunch of piercings in my ear wasn't such a cool idea after all. From a watch standpoint to getting ears pierced point, was there anything you ever did or wore in the ring that turned out to be a big friggin' mistake?
Can't believe I'm talking about this, but when I was young, I had a girlfriend that convinced me that I should get my nipple pierced. So I had my left nipple pierced when I first started out in the business, and I didn't really think anything of it. I made it through training camp just fine and several matches, and then one day somebody chopped me. And, every once in a while you catch a chop right on the nipple. Yeah. And it didn't tear it out, but it was bleeding and it sucked. And it was that point that I decided to take it out. I don't know what got it in my head in the first place that I decided to get my nipple pierced. But
did it hurt when they did that?
It did. It was excruciating, but it was just real quick. Just taking a deep breath, blow it out, and as you blow it out, they push it through, and it sucks for about 2 seconds, and then the pain goes away. It's not too bad.
I remember I first came into the company. I was working, a lot with Savio Vega, but a lot of times they were short-handed, so I was working on top with Bret Hart or Shawn Michaels. Now I was getting beat with the sharpshooter every night, or sweet chin music every night, but doing the JOB. But hey, man, when you're first in the WWF, you're a mechanic. They don't really have any plans for you, and you're working with two of the best workers that ever worked in the business. That's pretty cool, right?
Right.
And I remember Shawn Michaels at the time. He was working with that naval piercing. And then, for a while, it was Super Kick City. But then, as time went on, some stunners came into play. And when I was kicking him in the drum every single night, I guess I kicked that damn naval ring out of his belly button. I don't know how many times. I'm sure he wasn't very fond of it. Sometimes I laid those kicks in a little too much. But, hey, man, the jewelry in the ring can really be a pain in the ass.
Yeah. I've seen a couple students try to wear stuff in the ring, and I always tell them, get it out. Don't train and don't wrestle with that stuff, because it just takes, one wrong move or something gets snagged on an article of clothing or something like that, and it's going to be a big problem. You can get infected.
The other thing I did was, when I got a couple of tattoos on the inside of my leg, the Texas tattoo with the steer skull, I remember I got that thing. Dude, when you get fresh ink, and you're going to put your boots on, that's not a good thing. So you've got that, I put saran wrap around the damn thing, tape it up. And so you've got to take care of that ink, because if that ink gets messed up just because you're jacking around in the ring trying to do your job, you wasted a lot of money. You have some scars on your ink and it's going to look like shit. Did you ever do that? Well, I know you got some ink, but did you do that when it was time off?
No, I actually scheduled my back tat on the day that I had to work a show. So I got this ink done on my back, which I think total time was 7.5 hours in the chair or on the table. And I thought, it'll just be like a sunburn, right? I had this Joker tattoo on my arm. I'd gotten that when I was 18 years old, and it literally felt like a sunburn. It wasn't that bad. So I thought, it'd be the same thing. I'll be able to work. Man, I actually had to call a promoter and say, I can't work the show tonight because, my back is so messed up. It was bad. It was brutal.
Well, you should tell him, hey, man, I can work the match, but I can't take any bumps. I can't get on my back for a 3 count.
I said I can work the show. I just can't get in the ring and wrestle because I could barely move. I was I couldn't move. It was brutal. and I had to take your shirt off, put it back on, shower, all that stuff. It was just brutal. I never imagined that it was going to be as painful as it was. And I can't believe that people get their entire bodies tatted up. I just can't imagine what that would feel like. I'm too much of a pansy in order to do that.
Dude, as long as you ain't got to wrestle, it's okay. I guess the tattoo thing is cool. I mean, I stopped it too. I just, my representation was just this guy with not too much ink, just a couple on his legs. So I stopped. So I can understand people wanting to get a tattoo. That's all fine and dandy. But when you got to get in the square circle and work, if you're working in the Bill Watts territory, hell, even the Vince McMahon territory, you say, well, Vince, I just got this new tattoo. I'm probably going to take off a couple of weeks. You're probably going to get your notice.
Yeah, right. I feel like Randy Orton got his both sleeves done and worked. I mean, he had like a couple days off, but I mean, he did the whole shebang.
I think no scars on him. He must have pulled it off just fine.
He did, yeah. Yep. I don't think it was during a time off.
Hey, last time, Ken, tell people how they can contact you and check out your School of Wrestling.
So they can go to theacademyprowrestling.com, and you can also send us an email at info@theacademyprowrestling.com. And like I said, go to the website, check it out, and you can do a virtual tour on the website. So you can actually see the facility, or you can schedule a consult, and you can come in and we'll sit down, Dara and I will sit down and talk to you and kind of run you through what you can expect.
Well, Ken, good luck with it, man. It's good catching up with you, man. It's been years since we talked.
I know, yeah. I appreciate you having me on here, and look forward to hanging sometime soon, having a couple beers.
If you get out my way, give me a yell.
Will do. Oh, can I also say that the next class starts January 5th. So if you're interested in starting your career in pro wrestling, the next class begins January 5th. So sign up before then.
There you go. Ken, good talking to you.
You too.
Thank you for joining us for another classic episode of The Steve Austin Show. Please leave a rating and review on Apple Podcasts and tell your friends. For more Steve Austin Show, go to PodcastOne.com. That's PodcastOne.com.
See what hit blockbusters are streaming free this month during Popcorn Summer Movies on Pluto TV. Watch Django Unchained or Transformers Dark of the Moon for an action-packed evening, or The Truman Show and School of Rock for a good laugh with the whole family. Plus, Pluto TV has thousands of other free movies available on live and on demand. Download Pluto TV on all your favorite devices for free and start streaming now.
Guess who's on the Adam Carolla Show? Shawn Astin.
Encino Man, which I can't imagine you remember, but that was Brendan Fraser's kind of most popular movie, breakout movie.
Know it well. Never saw Lord of the Rings. Seen Encino Man more times.
You've seen Encino Man 15 times. Yeah. I know. It says a lot about you. Ke Huy Quan, who was then going as Daniel Kwan, had a small little part in that movie. It was Pauly Shore, and then I was the kind of straight man to Pauly and Brendan. The fact that these two guys, I actually posted a picture of the two of them, of Brendan and Key, shaking hands, and then in the background, me and Pauly, small in the background, are like, huh? And for them to find a part that people would love, I just so proud of them, so great for them. Now it's between me and Pauly who's going to get the next one.
The Adam Carolla Show, wherever finer podcasts are found.